Hello and welcome to TV on TV. I'm State Representative Tommy Vitolo. You're watching Brookline Interactive Group. Today is Thursday, January 30th, and we have a great show for you today. Today's guest is none other than Jessica Smyser, the Executive Director of right here, Brookline Interactive Group. It's a great conversation recorded earlier this week, and I hope that you will stay tuned and enjoy it. First, of course, I want to get to the news. United States President Donald Trump is expected to give his first speech to a joint session of Congress on March 4th. He will lay out plans for the early part of his administration and where he sees the country going over the next 4 years. The Office of Management and Budget announced all federal agencies would be forced to suspend all federal grants and loans except for Social Security and Medicare. This freeze includes monies appropriated by Congress, who control the federal government's spending. Scientists have set the doomsday clock at 89 seconds to midnight, the closest it has been to midnight. The clock is designed to spark conversations about topics such as climate change, international wars, and human behavior. Massachusetts will receive over $100 million from a settlement with Purdue Pharma. The announcement came last week from Attorney General Campbell's office. The money will go to support opioid treatment and recovery programs statewide. An earthquake off the coast of Maine was felt in Massachusetts Monday morning. The epicenter was roughly 7 miles southeast of York Harbor. A settlement has been reached allowing Massachusetts to access hydroelectricity from Canada. Construction on the project is expected to be completed in 2026. The Brookline Chamber of Commerce has relaunched its program connecting local restaurants with community organizations. The program involves local restaurants preparing meals to be distributed at town organizations like the Teen Center, Senior Center, and Food Pantry. A 24-year-old man was arrested last Thursday on charges of sexually exploiting children on Snapchat. The affidavit alleges he coerced 5 minors into sending him sexual images. Brookline High School's girls and boys varsity squash teams are headed to the national championship in Philadelphia in February. Folks, that's the news. Stay tuned for the flip side with my interview with Brookline Interactive Group's Executive Director, Jessica Smyser. We'll see you on the flip side. Hello and welcome to TV on TV. I'm still State Representative Tommy Vitolo. You're still watching Brookline Interactive Group. You may have noticed I'm not on Zoom today. We're live and in person. And the reason is because today's guest is Jessica Smyser, the Executive Director at Big. So we are at Big Studios to do the show. And let's get right to it. Thanks for being on the show.
Thanks for having me. This is fun.
I'm sure you're on shows all the time.
Yeah, too often.
Too often. Well, we got to put beautiful people on television. What choice do we have? So, Jessica, what have you been up to your whole life? Tell us the goods.
Well, I've been here at Brookline Interactive Group, aka Big, since April. So I still call myself new. So I'm going to keep saying I'm new here. And prior to that, I was executive director at Cambridge Community Television for about 3.5 years. And prior to that, I worked in arts and culture nonprofits in Santa Fe, New Mexico for about 10 years. And I've lived both in the West and the East. I grew up partly here in Massachusetts, in Gloucester, Massachusetts. And I actually have a really long family history in Brookline. It's the first time I've ever lived in Brookline. I now live in Brookline. I moved here. But my great-grandparents and grandparents on my mother's side all lived in Brookline, actually, and I looked it up on Tappan Street. So it's pretty cool.
Just right around the corner from the studio.
Yeah, to be in Brookline where they lived and where my grandfather was born. So it's kind of a return home for me.
And have you always had an interest in broadcast media, or is this a more recent sort of
Well, it depends on how you define recent. So back in 2007, I started to explore broadcast media, and I did an internship actually at ABC News with Ted Koppel on Nightline. And that was my first foray into broadcast media. prior to that, I had been really involved in the music business. So I worked for record labels. So locally, I work for Rounder Records. I work for a studio, and at the time, they had their own little label called Q Division. They still exist in Cambridge. And I worked for a couple of music distribution firms, and was in music business for about 10 years. And I've just have an interest in arts, culture, storytelling, media. My broadcast media experience at the ABC News was enlightening in both good and bad ways. But what I learned is that I really am interested in, really having a platform for people to tell their stories. And while I was there, if you remember that year, it was actually earlier in 2007, because it was the year of that horrible tsunami. Mm-hmm. And I just really learned a lot as an intern, watching how the producers and the storytellers worked in real time to tell these really, heartrending, devastating stories, and talking to people. And so, for example, one question that came up was how to translate the people who are speaking, because the choice was for there to be a translator speaking over the people's voices or to put captioning under the people's voices. And I remember it was actually a really long discussion about how important it was to hear people's own voice and hear the emotion in their voice and hear what they, even if we didn't understand, we could understand. And and it was actually, Ted Koppel and his producer were like, no, we need to hear the voices of these people. So people are going to have to read. We're going to put the captions down there. So, getting into broadcast media and storytelling, at that national level and then kind of coming down to the community level actually matches my personal interest, which is telling community stories, making sure that people have truthful, factual, and engaging information about how their local democracy works, how their local town works, and who their neighbors are, and the organizations that are here doing all this great work.
And so you were at Cambridge for a couple of years, mm-hmm. and Cambridge and Brookline have some similarities, or some mm-hmm. things that are different, but I think a lot of similarities. What were some of the things that at the time were sort of exciting in that studio? Is that over in Central Square? Do I have that right?
Yep, right in the heart of Central Square on Mass Ave. Yeah.
So what was exciting? What was going on over there that was exciting and sort of maybe cutting edge for local television, or some new things that were evolving?
Yeah, I mean, I started right in the middle of COVID. So it was an interesting time because everything had gone remote. So one of the quote unquote exciting things was there were a lot of people who were doing their show from their home, like you do all the time now. But that was the first time that had ever happened. CCTV Cambridge had never done that before. So it actually opened up this whole world of possibility for accessibility. So even when people could come back into the studio, we realized that there were some people for whom, they were elderly, they were handicapped, they didn't have the ability to come into a studio, that they could actually tell their story from home still. So instead of cutting off that ability to be remote right at the end of the pandemic, we're like, let's work with this. We can actually have more people's stories on TV by really honing and making our live studio from home work really smoothly. So that was an exciting thing, a kind of a, what was the word that everybody used all the time? Pivot.
Yeah.
There was a pivot that stayed pivoted. So we did have people come back in the studio, but we were able to actually have people continue to do their show from home. Another exciting thing there was the podcast studio. We built that out, and it became our most popular studio. And that's something we're going to be doing here as well.
Some people have a face for radio.
Yeah, people love the podcasting. It's really popular with all ages. Another big initiative there was digital literacy. So we had already been working with a lot of elders in the community and having, it was when I started, it was called computers for people over 50. And personally, I objected to that. And a lot of people did object to it because it just assumed that anyone over 50, was not as digitally
And it makes some
literate.
assumptions about people under 52.
Exactly. So I changed the name to Foundational Technology, and we opened it up to anybody who had a new iPhone, anybody who needed a little extra help with technology. And so that was a very popular program, and which ended up getting some funding, federal funding, as a consortium of digital literacy hubs in the Commonwealth. And we work with Mass Higher Metro North and a few other cities in that northern part of the hub, Boston, and hired some digital literacy facilitators to work with people specifically about how to get online, how to be productive online, how to be responsible citizens online. So some of the big initiatives there. And similarly, I just did a lot of work on operations, increased fundraising, increased membership, all of the things that needed to be done in a, modern, thriving community media station.
And so I want to get to the fundraising and the money in a little bit. First, I want to sort of point out that for my show, viewers know most of the time we do it on Zoom, and there's a couple of different reasons for that. For me, I could be at the State House, and so to come back to the studio to film a show and to go back, it's the travel time. It's also the travel time for the guest. My guests are busy, interesting people.
Yeah.
And so to do Zoom for them is much more convenient. But the other part is from staffing, obviously, your staff have a million things they want to do. The list is longer than they'll ever get to. The staffing here today, we have people operating the cameras and setting up this amazing studio and all of that. It's all work. It's all time. When we do it on Zoom, we sort of save that time, the staff people time, for other things, right? And so I love being in person, but I couldn't do a show once a week in person. I just couldn't make the time. So there are these trade-offs, right? But I'm delighted to be here today anyway.
Yeah.
So you've been in Brookline at Big since, is it April? Yeah, so it's 9 months. Starting to put your fingerprints on some things. What are some things where Big used to be doing it well, but now we're taking it to the next level? Where are some places you've put your fingerprints?
Yeah, so I love working on operations and coming in. I love working with staff and working on leadership and making sure that staff are all in the right job, in the right place, doing the things that they're best at. So that's been a priority. We have a wonderful staff here, as everybody knows who's ever been here. So making sure they feel supported, they're doing, what it is that they're best at and they can thrive, and learning all the time. I want us to be a learning organization. The other thing is operationally getting a CRM, so getting a customer management system in place, making sure that we're able to receive donations, we're able to track our members properly. And so the thing about getting those operations in place is it sort of sets the conditions for you to thrive. So getting our IT in place, getting our CRM in place, now we have this platform from which we can increase our donations, increase our membership. And we have. We had our first donor campaign at the end of the year, which was really successful. We had a lot of community members give for the first time, and that was exciting. All through our new CRM, where we're able to track and do those fun things like a thermometer and everything. And, our membership has doubled in the past 6 months or so. Again, those systems are in place so that we can go out there. We don't have to spend as much time on the administrative side of things because there's tools that'll help us do that. And what you alluded to, the staff can focus on, what they really love doing, which is helping people tell their story, working on all the great programming that Big does, and they don't have to, do a lot of data entry. So big focus has been really just streamlining, improving operations, working with the staff to make sure that everybody is in the right job, working at their best and supporting them in doing that. And so far it's been great. I really love it. And the last thing I'll say is coming in as a new ED, one big priority is making sure that I am connecting in with all the other organizations and collaborating. So we've been doing a lot of really fun work with various other organizations like Puppet Show Place Theater, Gateway Arts. Brookline Community Foundation has this great executive director roundtable that they sponsor. And they were just in here a few weeks ago where we had all the EDs practicing how to tell their mission-driven story on camera. We did a workshop with them, which is really great. And it went so well that they were like, let's do this with our staff. So we're going to have the staffs of other nonprofits come in here to learn from our staff about how to actually use their iPhone or a camera to tell their mission, how to improve their social media skills. So I've loved getting to know all the great nonprofits here in Brookline and collaborating with them. And that's been, that's probably the part of my job, that I love most is collaborating with other organizations. And it's been great. We've been having a lot of fun.
I think many viewers don't understand where your funding comes from, how your budget's created, right? They're public, but they're not part of the town government. They're this other thing, and money falls out of the sky occasionally and lands in their balance sheet. How are you funded? How does that work?
So we are an independent 501c3 nonprofit. So we are not a town entity. We are not a for-profit entity. We are a nonprofit, and we have to operate like any nonprofit, which is from grants, donations. We have to fundraise. The difference with community media is there is a fixed historical funding source, which is what we call franchise fees. And so that dates back to the beginning of cable television time. And at that time, the cable companies, in Brookline's case, there were 2 franchises. In Cambridge, there was only 1. So here there are 2, RCN and Comcast. They are required to give a portion of their cable subscription fees to support community media. And now that's a nationwide thing, but each state did it differently. And so here in Massachusetts, those monies usually go through the town or go directly to the community media in the town. And it's a percentage, 5% of the cable subscriptions. And as everybody knows, cable subscriptions, especially since 2010, 2012, have really, really plummeted. And so that funding that was pretty reliable and consistent for many, many years for community media has really gone off a cliff. So community media in general, and big specifically, really has to think about what are our alternative funding sources. And that doesn't just have to be donations, although we've never really in the past asked for the community to step up in the way that they have this year, which has been great. But we can also, bring in earned revenue. So we can do professional development trainings. We can work with other nonprofits to help do their digital media. One of the things that is really fun is if we can have corporations or other organizations come in and pay for us to train them to do digital media and in turn support community media. So right now, the majority of our funding has come from this cable franchise fee, as well as some federal funding from ARPA funds and some funding from the state, and then some fees that the town pays us for the services we provide.
And those are like filming the select board and the school committee and town meeting, so that the public has another way to access their own local government.
Exactly, yeah. So, we do receive some funding from the town to do that. But that we're going to need to make up that gap of cable franchise funding over the next few years in many different ways. We have to diversify our funding to replace what had been a pretty single reliable source. And we're getting there with that successful fundraising campaign, with other grantors that we're going to be applying for grants for. We are just going to have to, over the next 2 years, really focus on increasing those alternative forms of revenue.
And this is not a challenge unique to Brookline Interactive Group or
Absolutely
even
not.
Massachusetts.
No.
This is nationwide, and so I'm sure your brother and sister organizations throughout the country are talking about this, different ideas that work, that don't work, that maybe work in some places and not others. But let's talk about other challenges on the horizon. So we talked about the cable cutters, the cord cutters, and the loss in that sort of certainty in revenue. Do you see any other challenges or concerns on the horizon?
Well, most of the other concerns I see are, again, similarly to what you just said, these are concerns that any nonprofit is going to have. I think a lot of nonprofits are worried about changes in grant funding, maybe some scarcity in grant funding that's going to come about in the next few years for financial reasons and other reasons. So really trying to be strategic about how we approach seeking this alternative revenue from other grantors. We also don't know what the overall financial situation of the country is going to be, how much money people are going to have to do individual donations. So all those uncertainties. With the incoming administration, particularly for community media, there will be a change in the FCC leadership, and there have been some rumblings that the new administration has actually been paying attention to community media. And sometimes we like it when they pay attention. Sometimes we just are like, well, maybe it's not so good to pay attention. And have talked about relieving the burden of the cable companies for supporting the communities that they work in. So that's a little concerning because even though that funding has gone down, it's still there. We're still getting some funding. And so for the FCC to prioritize the cable companies' income over the community good is a little bit concerning and can maybe a challenge we'll be facing in the next few years.
What about the positive for the next few years? What are your vision for some ideas you want to try, some things you've already got, some steady plans to roll out? Obviously, the best laid plans sometimes get delayed or distracted because of new challenges that show up. But share some of your vision for the big of 2030.
Well, so many things have already been happening that are so exciting, and people are just really excited and starved for collaboration on the community level. And so a lot of what we've been working on and will continue to work on is really changing our member model to be more when you're joining a membership, it's not so much a transaction as it's a transformational model. It's a movement lens, right? So we invited people into our membership and not saying, okay, if you join, you get this. You join, you get access to great cameras and you get access to studio. That's true. But what we're going to be doing is also having more events, more classes, more support for people when they join to be a member, and more opportunities for them to meet other members. So when you join, it's not just a transaction, it's actually you're entering into a community and you become responsible as a community member. So we're creating opportunities for people to become members and engage with other members' projects, for example. So they don't have to come with a fully formed idea of some video project they want to do. They can just come and say, I'm just really interested in what you're doing here. And they could do camera on another member's piece when they first come in. They could take classes. They can engage with our youth program, just to make our membership model more of a community model and less of a transactional model. That's a big one, and I think that's going to have a transformative effect over the years. And we've already seen membership go up because of it, and we have some exciting classes coming up in the spring on orientations, screenwriting class, things that'll bring people together. And a lot of those opportunities are also intergenerational, and that's a big priority too. To pair teens with seniors, to pair adults with teens, to have classes that bring a very diverse group of community members together to work on projects together. That's going to be really exciting, and I think it'll have a really positive impact on the community because we're all just so disconnected sometimes. People are at home on their phones. They don't know how to connect in with their community. The service we provide of being able to watch town government is great, and people can engage in it through watching it. But we're wanting to take it a step further and have an opportunity for people to come in here and engage in a really tangible way. The other things we're doing are more collaborations. We believe that community media stations are perfectly positioned in whatever community they're in, especially in Brookline, as a hub of activity. We are one of the few organizations in town that works with town government, works with the high school, works with every nonprofit. We have connections to almost everybody across this town that a lot of nonprofits and other organizations don't have. So when you support us, you're also supporting Puppet Showplace. You're also supporting Gateway. You're also supporting town meeting, because we are in this unique position as a hub. And we're going to definitely amplify that and create more collaborations and do more work. In terms of physical infrastructure, I mentioned briefly before that we are going to build out and improve our podcast studio. And that's really exciting because a lot of people have been asking for that. So we just started doing that. It's functional now. It's not as pretty as we want it to be, so we're going to do some more painting and some more stuff. And we'd love as much support as anybody has for helping us build that out. The teens we work with are super excited about podcasting. I know there's a lot of adults out there who have a lot of really interesting things to say, who would love to come in and use the podcast studio. So I think that's going to be a really great addition.
Sounds like there's all kinds of things on the horizon. One thing you mentioned, and I should have been a little more clear about, one of the great things about Big is some people want to be on this side of the camera. Others want to be on the other side of the camera. Introverts, extroverts, technical people, artistic people, creative people. There's so much going on this floor. There's so many ways to be a part of this. There's something for everyone.
Yeah.
And there's something for every skill level, right? Mm-hmm. And so that's one of the things that I've always loved about Big is you can just kind of go as far as you want to go with it, and there's always going to be the support for it. BrooklineInteractive.org is the website. Folks can go, they can see the shows, they can learn about the staff, they can see all of the different things that Big has going on.
Sign up for classes.
They can sign up for classes, and they can hit that contribute button or
Yes.
that become a member button. And I hope folks will do that because, look, I love doing a show. I have a great time. I do a lot of shows, quantity maybe over quality some weeks, but we'll take what we can get. And so I can tell you that I'm very grateful for your work and for the work of the folks behind the cameras.
Yay, thank you.
Right? The staff who's always working very hard and often very quietly to make all of this possible. So thank you, folks. You've been watching TV on TV. Again, our guest, Jessica, the Executive Director of Brookline Interactive Group. That's another show, and we hope to see you as soon as next week. Thanks for watching.